Surprising traces have recently begun to emerge in the heart of South America. Researchers have identified extensive canals and pathways in the Amazon that do not appear to be natural formations. On the contrary, everything indicates they were planned and constructed by human hands, forming complex irrigation systems and organized networks that resemble the layout of a city. For a long time, we were taught that the Amazon had been occupied only by small groups of hunter-gatherers until relatively recent periods. However, these new discoveries are beginning to dismantle that narrative. A recent expedition decided to follow a series of magnetic anomalies detected deep within the jungle and ended up arriving at something completely unexpected: a sealed chamber hidden beneath the forest. What was inside did not resemble simple traces of survival at all. Instead of rudimentary tools, the researchers found giant ribs of animals extinct since the Ice Age, arranged into structures that resembled the interior of a cathedral. Carbon dating of the site produces results that simply do not fit within the timeline accepted by traditional history books. But before we continue, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. The fact is that whoever built this place mastered advanced engineering techniques thousands of years before they were supposed to exist. And, by all indications, they left behind a message capable of completely changing the way we understand the history of humanity. The invisible city revealed. The Amazon is approximately the same size as the entire continental United States. Even so, despite satellites and modern technology, we know less about the ground beneath the Amazon than we do about the surface of the moon. It remains the planet's last great blind spot. For more than a century, explorers disappeared while trying to locate lost cities hidden within the forest. Vegetation grows so quickly that it can swallow an entire stone temple in just a few years. But today we no longer rely solely on machetes and jungle trails to find ruins. There is a technology capable of seeing through the forest: LiDAR. Think of LiDAR as a kind of sonar made of light. An aircraft flies above the treetops, firing billions of laser pulses toward the ground. Most of these pulses strike leaves and branches, but some manage to pass through small openings and reflect off the terrain. Then a computer digitally removes all vegetation from the collected data. The result is as if the forest simply disappears, revealing the hidden landscape underneath. In 2019, researcher Ella Al-Shamahi led a survey of a remote region on the border between Brazil and Colombia. That area was supposed to show nothing but untouched nature. But when the data began appearing on the laboratory screens, the room fell silent. What appeared there were not random hills. They were lines, perfectly straight lines stretching for miles across the jungle. Nature does not create straight lines. The scan revealed roads, elevated platforms, and square plazas. It looked like the layout of a carefully planned city, hidden beneath the vines of the forest. But the most impressive detail was at the center of the map. Exactly at the base of a limestone ridge, the laser data revealed a perfect oval shape. It was not a sinkhole. The density of the rock was different from anything around it. It looked like a gigantic door that had been fused and sealed. Dr. Ella realized that it was not just a settlement. It was a fortress. The scale was astonishing. The mapped area covered about 30 square miles. To sustain a city of that size, an enormous system of agriculture, trade, and engineering would have been required. According to the traditional timeline, the people living in the Amazon at that time should have been small nomadic tribes. This scan proved that assumption wrong. But it becomes even stranger. The LiDAR showed that the door in the ridge was not buried under soil. It was exposed rock, yet it displayed a chemical signature suggesting it had been heated to extreme temperatures. It was as if someone, or something, had melted the rock in order to seal it. The team knew they could not just stare at the screen. They needed to go there. But the jungle pushes back. The location was hundreds of miles from the nearest road, in a region known for violent storms and extremely difficult terrain. Dr. Ella organized an expedition believing she would find a lost city. She had no idea that the city would only be the beginning. The real secret was waiting inside that stone ridge. And reaching it would require crossing a landscape that seemed to challenge time itself. The journey to the ridge revealed the first impossible clue: walking with extinct beasts. The team cut their way through the jungle toward the site. It took weeks. When they finally reached the base of the ridge, they did not immediately find the door. They found something else. They began clearing moss from the face of the cliff, and suddenly one of the assistants shouted, The rock was not gray, it was red. They had discovered a mural, but these were not just a few handprints. It was like the Sistine Chapel of the ancient world. The painting stretched for nearly 100 feet along the cliff, and the details were frighteningly precise. This is where everything becomes even stranger. The paintings did not show jaguars or monkeys. They showed animals that have been extinct for 12,000 years. There were drawings of mastodons, relatives of elephants that disappeared at the end of the last ice age. There were giant sloths. And when we say giant sloth, do not think of the small, calm ones that live in trees today. These creatures were the size of a van and could reach about 12 feet tall when they stood on their hind legs. Their claws were as long as a human forearm. The fact that these animals were painted on the wall meant one thing. The artists had seen them alive. That dated the site to at least 12,600 years ago. Thousands of years older than any sophisticated civilization was supposed to exist in that region. But it was not merely a nature documentary painted in stone. Analysis of the pigment revealed something astonishing. The red ochre used in the painting did not come from the local soil. Its chemical signature matched mineral deposits located more than 400 miles away. Think about that. 12,000 years ago, these people were not merely surviving. They were traveling, trading, and transporting specific artistic materials across half a continent. That requires a level of organization comparable to ancient Egypt. Yet all of this happened in the heart of the wild Amazon. However, Dr. Ella noticed something disturbing in the mural. The animals were not simply standing still. They were running. Every figure was depicted in a state of panic, fleeing from a specific direction. And right in the middle of the chaos, there was a human figure standing beneath a strange symbol. It looked like a circle with irregular lines radiating from it, like a ring of fire in the sky. Next to the figure were dots arranged in a pattern. An astronomer on the team realized it was not decoration. It was a star map. But the stars were not in the positions we see today. They matched exactly the night sky as it appeared around 10,800 BC. That was the end of the Younger Dryas period, a time when Earth experienced a sudden and violent climate shift. Temperatures plunged and then skyrocketed. The ice caps melted. The oceans rose. The mural was a record of that disaster. The people who built that place were not simply drawing. They were leaving a warning. They were telling us that the world had already ended once before, and the path led directly to the sealed oval door that LiDAR had detected. The team followed the base of the cliff until they found it. The door was a section of rock smoother than the surrounding stone, covered by a pale mineral coating known as calcite. It looked like a mineral flow formation, but far harder. And here is the unsettling detail. When they approached the seal, the electronic equipment began to malfunction. The needles of the compasses started spinning, pointing toward the sealed door, opening the time capsule. Spinning compass needles usually mean one thing: an enormous amount of magnetic material or metals nearby. But that ridge was made of limestone. Limestone is not magnetic. The team installed scanners to find a weak point in the calcite wall. The vibration readings suggested that the rock was not solid. There was a hollow space behind it. A huge space. Dr. Ella gave the order to drill. They used diamond-tipped drills, expecting to break through the wall in an hour. It took 3 days. The mineral seal was incredibly dense, reinforced with something that wore down the tools. Finally, the drill broke through. And then something happened that sent chills through everyone there. A whistle. Pressurized air escaped through the hole. This sometimes happens in sealed tombs, but that air was different. It had no smell of decay or rot. It had a metallic scent, like ozone and wet iron. It was the smell of a storm trapped inside a bottle for millennia. They widened the hole enough to pass through. Dr. Ella went first. She descended into the darkness as the beam from her headlamp cut through the dust. The first thing she noticed was the floor. It was not the uneven ground of a cave. It was paved. Inside a cave sealed since the Ice Age, there was a smooth, level floor. But it becomes even more impressive. The floor was made of a dark soil rich in carbon. It is what specialists call terra preta. It is a super soil created by humans and found in the Amazon. It was developed to be extremely fertile and virtually inexhaustible. Even today, we do not fully understand how it was made so perfect. Finding it inside the cave meant that it was not a natural formation. It was a deliberately engineered shelter. When the rest of the team entered, they realized the scale of the place. The ceiling arched about 30 feet above them. The walls were reinforced with basalt pillars, an extremely hard volcanic rock that had to be transported from miles away. It was an architectural masterpiece. It had been built to support the weight of the mountain. They walked deeper inside, following the paved path. The air was heavy. The silence was absolute. There were no bats, no insects, only the sound of their boots on the ancient ground. Then the path opened into a central chamber, and what they saw there made the LiDAR discovery seem ordinary. Lined along the walls were bones, but they were not piled like in a cemetery. They were arranged. Enormous curved ribs, each more than 6 feet long, were anchored into the ground in perfect arches, forming something like a ribcage tunnel. They were ribs from the mastodons they had seen in the mural outside. The builders had used the bones of these giants to create a structure inside the cave. It looked like a temple or a sanctuary. The effort required to drag these multi-ton bones into the cave and position them there is difficult even to imagine. But why? Why build a cathedral of bones inside a sealed mountain? Dr. Ella walked to the center of the chamber. There was a circular depression there, like a pool. It was filled with a completely motionless black liquid. It looked like a dark mirror. When she shined her flashlight on the surface, the reflection did not look normal. The liquid was thick, viscous. It was not water. It was something entirely different. The echo of the impact. The team approached the black pool cautiously. In the Amazon, standing water usually means parasites and disease. But that liquid was sterile. They collected a sample. It was neither oil nor muddy water. The field test revealed that it was water heavily saturated with metallic isotopes and charcoal. It was almost like a liquid preservation agent. And it worked. Floating in that dense black liquid were seeds. They were not fossilized seeds. They were preserved organic material. The team's botanist almost fainted. They were seeds from plants that had gone extinct more than 10,000 years ago. There were species of palms and medicinal plants that no longer exist in the modern Amazon. This changes everything. The cave was not a tomb for people. It was an ark. The builders saw the disaster coming. The ring of fire in the sky shone in the mural. They knew the plants outside would die. So they built a shelter, created a sterile environment using the black liquid and the terra preta, and stored the seeds of their world so it could be replanted later. But they never got that chance. The team found jars sealed with wax along the walls. Inside them were more seeds, dried tubers, and genetic samples of the crops of that time. It was an end-of-the-world vault, exactly like the one that exists today in Norway, but built 12,000 years ago. This proves that those ancient people understood biology, preservation, and long-term planning at a level we never imagined. They were not simply surviving day to day. They were thinking about the future of their civilization centuries ahead. But there was one final mystery inside the cave. The back wall. It was covered by a thick layer of soot. Not from a normal fire, but from a high-intensity explosion. Embedded in the soot were tiny glass spheres called microspherules. These tiny glass beads only form when rocks are melted by a cosmic impact or a nuclear-level explosion. Dr. Ella realized the truth. The Younger Dryas impact theory suggests that a fragment of a comet struck Earth about 12,800 years ago, triggering massive fires and a sudden freeze. The microspherules in the wall proved that the theory was real. The shockwave from the impact must have reached that place. The heat was so intense that it melted the rock outside, sealing the cave. The people who built that vault did not mysteriously disappear. They were trapped. Or perhaps they sealed the place from the inside to protect its contents, hoping that someone in the future would find it. The structure of bones, the star map, the seed bank. Everything was a message. They were trying to save the fundamental elements of their world. The magnetic anomaly the team detected outside came from the basalt pillars. They were strongly magnetized, probably due to the intense electrical storms that occurred during a cosmic impact event. Everything inside the cave was a physical record of the day the world almost ended. But the most unsettling part was what they found beside the pool. Near the edge of the mysterious black pool, the team discovered something that should not have been there. It was a set of tools. They were elegant, sharp, and black. They were made of obsidian volcanic glass. Here is the problem. There is no obsidian in the Amazon. The geology of the region simply does not allow it. To find volcanic glass like that, you have to travel to the Andes Mountains. That means crossing thousands of miles through some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. Finding obsidian there is like finding a polar bear in the Sahara. It simply makes no sense. That confirmed something enormous. It proved that a trade network existed, a network that stretched across the entire continent. We are not talking about a few men walking along trails. We are talking about a true commercial superhighway, transporting heavy raw materials across seemingly impossible distances. But how did they move all of that? This is where the first bold theory appears. Some more alternative researchers look at the size of those obsidian blocks and the absence of wheel marks and suggest something radical. They talk about acoustic levitation. There are legends throughout the Andes about priests who could use sound, specific frequencies produced by horns or chants, to make heavy rocks lighter. Today we know that sound waves can levitate small droplets of water in laboratory conditions. Could those ancient civilizations have discovered how to scale that technology? Could they have moved these tools across mountains by vibrating them through the air? It sounds insane, but when you look at the pristine condition of those tools, the question begins to arise. However, the tools themselves were not the most frightening part. It was the way they were found. They were carefully arranged, perfectly parallel. A chisel here, a hammerstone there. It looked exactly like a workshop where the worker had just stepped away for lunch. It was almost possible to imagine that he would return at any moment. But no one returned. There were no bodies in the cave. The ground was scanned. The corners were examined. They searched for burial pits. This is the part that keeps experts awake at night. If this cave was a shelter designed to survive an apocalypse, where are the people? If they died there, where are the bones? If they left, why did they leave their most valuable tools behind, arranged so carefully? Dr. Ella has a theory, but it is a heavy one. She believes the cave was not built for them. It was built for us. But there are others who go even further. They look at the absence of bodies and the electromagnetic anomalies in the walls and propose what is called the phase shift theory. What if they did not die? What if they did not leave on foot? Quantum physicists say there may be other dimensions overlapping our own. Some theorists believe that this highly advanced culture discovered a way to make their physical bodies vibrate at a higher frequency. When the cataclysm arrived, when the sky turned to fire and the floods began, they did not run. They simply shifted. They stepped sideways into a parallel reality, leaving their physical tools behind because they no longer needed matter. It sounds like science fiction, but we have legends about star people or sky gods disappearing in a flash of light in almost every ancient culture. Maybe they did not go to the stars. Maybe they are still here, just invisible to our eyes. But let us come back to Earth for a moment, or at least to geology. Dr. Ella believes they knew they could not physically survive the cataclysm that was coming. The climate was changing too quickly. The Younger Dryas impact event was cooling the planet almost overnight. The megafauna, which was their main food source, was disappearing in mass extinctions. They saw the warning signs. They knew their time was running out, so they dedicated their final efforts to a single goal: preserving the source code of their civilization. They sealed the cave. They placed the seeds and the DNA records of animals safely inside the earth. They protected everything with magnetized rock to deflect radiation and with the chemical pool to stabilize the temperature. Then, they sealed the door. What happened to them after that remains a mystery. Maybe they walked out into the freezing cold and perished. Maybe they went deeper into the earth. That is another bold theory that has been gaining attention. Many indigenous tribes of the Amazon speak about the ant people, or the ones within, who live in vast cave systems deep underground. Could this civilization have retreated further into the Earth's crust, using geothermal energy to survive the ice age on the surface? If the LiDAR data is correct and there are tunnels connecting these places for hundreds of miles, it is possible that they did not build just a shelter. They may have built a doorway to an underground world we have not even mapped yet. Whatever happened to them, This discovery forces us to rewrite the history books. We need to tear out the first chapter of human history and start again. For a long time, we believed civilization began in Mesopotamia, in modern-day Iraq, about 6,000 years ago. We were told that before that we were merely hunter-gatherers, striking stones together. But this site in the Amazon proves that highly complex societies existed thousands of years before Sumer or Babylon. They mastered geology. They understood chemistry well enough to create that preservation pool. They had agricultural systems that make our own techniques seem primitive. And they possessed astronomical knowledge capable of predicting cosmic cycles. They faced a threat we are still vulnerable to today: a sudden and violent shift in the planet's climate. This raises the so-called mother culture theory. For years, some people have whispered about Atlantis, not as a magical underwater city filled with mermaids, but as a real global maritime civilization that existed during the Ice Age. Could the Amazon have been a colony of that lost empire? The symbols on the obsidian tools match symbols found in Turkey, at Göbekli Tepe. They also match symbols found in Indonesia. How could that be possible unless there was a global culture connected by ships, or by flight? Yes, flight. Among the artifacts are small gold objects that look suspiciously like airplanes, aerodynamic wings, vertical stabilizers. Archaeologists call them zoomorphic insects. But when one of them is placed in a wind tunnel, it produces lift. If those people had flight, then the lost city was not just a city of gold. It was the center of a global network. It was a city of knowledge. The real treasure was not jewels. It was the proof that humanity may have risen and fallen more times than we imagine. So, what do you think? Do you believe there are more end-of-the-world vaults hidden in the Amazon? Or was this just a single case in history? It really makes you wonder how much we actually know about our past. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep exploration into the unknown, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You will not want to miss what we uncover next. Thank you for watching.